Get out before I call security on you, old man. That's what my own son said to me. Tom Wilson, 59 years old, standing in the auto shop I built from nothing 25 years ago. After Brandon won $8.1 million in the lottery, he thought that ticket made him king of everything we'd worked for together. But he had no idea whose name was really on that winning ticket. I stayed calm, walked to my truck, and made one phone call. By the end of that week, his whole world had crumbled like a house of cards. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I want to hear from people who understand what it means to build something with your bare hands, only to watch someone try to tear it down. But let me start from the beginning, because this story shows what happens when respect dies and greed takes over. You need to understand something about my relationship with Brandon. For the past 2 years, ever since his mother Linda died, he'd been treating me like I was some kind of burden, like I was holding him back from his grand plans. The first time I really noticed it was last March. We were working on Mrs. Patterson's Honda Civic. She'd been coming to us for 15 years. Brandon looked at her and said, "You know, if my dad would just retire, we could modernize this place. Get some real diagnostic equipment instead of these ancient tools." Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. I just kept working on her brake pads, but something inside me cracked that day. The second incident happened in July. Brandon invited some of his college friends to see the shop. I heard him telling them, "Yeah, my dad's still stuck in the past. He doesn't understand that customers want efficiency, not some old guy taking forever with a wrench." I was right there in my own shop, and he talked about me like I was invisible. But the real problem wasn't just his attitude. Our shop was drowning. We were $23,000 behind on the mortgage. The electric bill alone was $890 every month. Property insurance was $340. And without Linda's teacher salary, she made $42,000 a year. I was barely keeping the lights on. Brandon knew all this. He knew I'd taken out a second mortgage on the shop just to keep us afloat after Linda's medical bills. Cancer treatment cost us over $60,000, even with insurance. But instead of helping, he kept pushing for investments we couldn't afford. "We need new lifts, Dad. We need computerized diagnostic equipment. We need to market online. Everything cost money we didn't have." The new hydraulic lift he wanted? $15,000. The diagnostic computer? Another $8,000. Meanwhile, our weekly revenue was barely $8,500, and most of that went to overhead. I started eating one meal a day to save money. Stopped getting my prescriptions filled. Blood pressure medication cost me $85 a month. Brandon never noticed. He was too busy planning our transformation. The worst part was watching our longtime customers start to drift away. Carlos Martinez had been bringing his family's cars to us for 18 years, but even he seemed uncomfortable with Brandon's attitude. "Tom," Carlos told me quietly one day, "your boy's got some ideas about customer service that don't sit right with folks. When you've built relationships with 341 active customers over 25 years, and you watch your own son drive them away with his arrogance, it cuts deep." These weren't just clients. They were neighbors, friends, people who trusted me with their family's safety every time they got behind the wheel. But Brandon had no idea what I'd been planning. See, every week for the past 3 months, I'd been setting aside $40 from our business account to buy lottery tickets. Not for fun, not for hope, but because I knew something had to change, and fast. August 15th, 3:47 in the afternoon, Murphy's gas station on Elm Street. I bought 5 quick pick tickets using our business debit card. Account number ending in 4429. Same as always. Same routine I'd followed every Tuesday for 12 weeks straight. The receipt was in my wallet. The bank statement would show the transaction. The security camera at Murphy's caught everything. Brandon thought he was smart, keeping track of his own gambling money, buying his personal tickets with cash. But he never paid attention to what I was doing with legitimate business expenses. That ticket, the $8.1 million winner, had my name on it in every way that mattered. Let me be clear about what I stood to lose if I kept my mouth shut. The shop itself was worth $185,000 according to the latest appraisal. That was my entire life savings, sitting in that 3,400 square foot building on Maple Avenue. My house was already leveraged to the hilt. Second mortgage of $97,000 just to keep the business running. But it wasn't just about money. When you've spent 25 years building something, your reputation becomes part of your identity. I wasn't just Tom Wilson anymore. I was Wilson's Auto Repair. That meant something in Toledo. Carlos Martinez brought his whole extended family to me. His brother Miguel, his cousin Eduardo, his neighbor Janet Thompson. When Carlos told people, "Tom Wilson's the only mechanic I trust," that carried weight. Real weight. Now Brandon was threatening to fire my two mechanics, Jerry Davis and Paul Anderson. Jerry had worked for me for 11 years, Paul for 7. They weren't just employees. They were family men with mortgages and kids in school. Jerry's daughter Sarah was starting college in the fall. Paul's son needed orthodontic work that cost $4,000. "Dad, we don't need these old guys anymore," Brandon kept saying. "I can hire younger mechanics for half the price." Half the price, sure, but Jerry could diagnose a transmission problem just by listening to the engine. Paul could rebuild a carburetor blindfolded. You don't replace 30 years of combined experience with cheap labor. Brandon's plan was to fire them both and hire 2 recent trade school graduates at $12 an hour instead of the 22 Jerry and Paul were making. In Brandon's mind, that was smart business. In reality, it was a recipe for disaster. Our customer retention rate was 94%. Our average repair time was 40% faster than our competitors. Our comeback rate, customers returning with the same problem, was less than 2%. Those numbers didn't happen by accident. They happened because Jerry, Paul, and I took pride in our work. But Brandon didn't understand any of that. He saw dollar signs, not relationships. "Once I modernize this place," he told his girlfriend Ashley, "we'll be the most profitable shop in the county." I heard him making these plans. He wanted to rename the business Next Gen Auto Solutions. He wanted to install one of those automated customer service systems where people had to punch numbers instead of talking to a human being. He wanted to charge diagnostic fees up front, $50 just to look at your car, whether we fixed it or not. All of that would have destroyed everything I'd built. My reputation, my relationships, my legacy. See, respect in this business comes from consistency. When Mrs. Patterson brought her Civic in for an oil change, she knew exactly what to expect. Fair price, honest assessment, work done right the first time. She'd been coming to me since her car was brand new in 2008. 15 years of trust. Brandon wanted to treat her like just another transaction. Run her car through some computerized system, quote her a bunch of services she didn't need, and send her on her way with a bill twice what she expected. That's not how you build a business. That's how you destroy one. But Brandon was about to learn something important about ownership. Having a lottery ticket doesn't make you the boss. Having your name on the legal documents does. And my name was on everything that really mattered. The business account where that lottery ticket was purchased, the shop's incorporation papers, the insurance policies, the vendor relationships, the customer database I'd been building for 2.5 decades. Brandon thought winning the lottery made him untouchable. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. September 3rd, 2:15 in the afternoon. That's when everything changed. I was under the hood of a 2019 Chevy Silverado when I heard Brandon's voice echo through the shop. He was practically shouting, "Everybody gather around! I've got news!" Jerry looked up from the brake job he was working on. Paul wiped his hands on a shop rag. Carlos Martinez, who'd brought his wife's car in for a tune-up, stopped talking to his brother Miguel. Brandon stood in the center of the shop, holding his phone up like it was made of gold. "I just won $8.1 million in the lottery." The reaction was immediate. Jerry's wrench clattered to the floor. Paul's mouth fell open. Carlos started laughing. Not the good kind, but the shocked, uncomfortable kind. "8 million?" Jerry asked. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Brandon said. He was grinning like a fool. "I checked it 3 times. The numbers match perfectly." Then he looked directly at me. His expression changed. The grin turned cold, which means some things around here are about to change. I straightened up slowly, closing the Silverado's hood with a quiet click. "What kind of changes?" I asked. "Well, for starters, this place needs new management." The shop went dead quiet. You could hear the air compressor cycling in the corner. "New management," I repeated. "That's right." I'm tired of watching you hold this business back with your outdated methods. Carlos shifted uncomfortably. Miguel looked confused. Jerry and Paul exchanged glances. Brandon, I said carefully, we should probably discuss this privately. No, Dad. Everyone needs to hear this. He gestured around the shop. You've had 25 years to make this place profitable. Look where we are. Behind on bills, ancient equipment, customers leaving for the competition. Our customer retention rate is 94%, I said, because you're too cheap to invest in proper marketing. Carlos cleared his throat. Brandon, maybe your father has a point about... With respect, Mr. Martinez, this is family business. The way Brandon said, with respect, made it clear he had none. Carlos had been bringing his cars to us since Brandon was 13 years old, but now my son was dismissing him like some stranger off the street. You know what? Brandon continued, his voice getting louder. I'm done pretending this is a partnership. I'm done watching you embarrass our family name with this poverty mentality. Poverty mentality? Yeah, Dad. Poverty mentality. You never contributed anything real to this business except elbow grease and stubbornness. That hit like a punch to the gut. 25 years of 12-hour days. 25 years of building relationships. 25 years of putting our customers first, even when it cost us money. Paul stepped forward. Now hold on, Brandon. Your father built this place from... Paul, you're fired. The words hung in the air like smoke. Excuse me? You heard me. Pack your tools. Jerry, too. I want both of you out by Friday. Jerry's face went red. You can't just... I can do whatever I want. I'm a millionaire now. This is my shop. Actually, I said quietly, it's not. Brandon spun around. What did you say? I said it's not your shop. The hell it isn't? I just won $8 million. I can buy and sell this place 10 times over. Winning money doesn't change who owns what. Brandon laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Dad, you're living in the past. Money changes everything. You think these people respect you? They're just being polite because they feel sorry for you. Carlos started to object, but Brandon cut him off. You want to know what I really think? You're a relic, a dinosaur who can't accept that the world moved on without him. He pulled out his phone again like he was making some kind of point. This lottery ticket is my ticket out of your shadow, and the first thing I'm doing is putting this business in capable hands. My hands. And if I refuse? Brandon's grin came back, but it was meaner now, more confident. Then you can find yourself another job. Because I don't need you anymore, old man. I don't need anyone in this room. He looked around at Jerry, Paul, Carlos, and Miguel like they were insects. The age of Tom Wilson is over. Welcome to the Brandon Wilson era. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do. Brandon had just made his biggest mistake in front of the 4 people who mattered most in our little community, but he had no idea what was coming. The shop stayed quiet for a long moment after Brandon's declaration. Jerry was still staring at the floor where he'd dropped his wrench. Paul looked like someone had slapped him. Carlos and Miguel seemed frozen in place. You know what, Brandon? I said finally. You might be right. Everyone turned to look at me. Brandon's eyebrows shot up. Maybe it is time for changes around here. Dad, Let me finish. My voice was calm, but I could feel something building inside me. Not anger, something colder, more focused. You want to talk about who contributed what to this business? Fine. Let's talk about contributions. I walked over to my desk in the corner, the same gray metal desk I'd used for 23 years, started pulling out files. You mentioned outdated methods. Jerry, what was our average repair time last month? Jerry looked confused but answered, 2.4 hours per job. And Paul, what was our comeback percentage? 1.8%. Carlos, how long have you been bringing your cars here? 18 years, Tom. Ever had a problem we couldn't fix? Never. Brandon was getting impatient. Dad, what's your point? My point is that success isn't just about money, son. It's about relationships. It's about trust. It's about keeping your word. I opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were bank statements going back 3 months. You want to know about contributions? Let me show you something. Brandon stepped closer, curious despite himself. Every Tuesday for the past 12 weeks, I've been making a $40 withdrawal from our business account. So, account number 4429, the same account we use for all our business expenses. Dad, I don't understand what... August 15th, Tuesday, 3:47 p.m., Murphy's gas station on Elm Street. Brandon's confidence flickered for just a second. I bought 5 lottery tickets that day, same as I'd been doing every Tuesday since June. The room was so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Brandon, what day did you buy your winning ticket? August 15th. But Dad, that doesn't... And where did you buy it? Murphy's. But listen, I paid cash. I have the receipt. I'm sure you do. I closed the folder and set it back in the drawer, but I left the drawer open. Just a crack. Paul, could you hand me that phone? Paul grabbed the shop's landline and passed it over. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Margaret? It's Tom Wilson. Could you come by the shop when you get a chance? I need to show you some paperwork. Margaret Davis had been our family attorney for 20 years. She'd handled Linda's will. She'd helped me incorporate the business back in 1999. She knew every legal document I'd ever signed. What paperwork? Brandon asked. Just some business records. Nothing urgent, but there was something in my tone that made everyone pay attention. Carlos tilted his head slightly. Jerry was watching my face carefully. Even Paul had stopped what he was doing. Actually, Margaret, could you come by this afternoon? Around 4 o'clock, I hung up the phone and looked at Brandon. You know, son, you're absolutely right about one thing. It is time for the Brandon Wilson era to begin. Brandon smiled, thinking he'd won some kind of victory. I'm glad you're finally seeing sense, Dad. Oh, I'm seeing plenty. In fact, I'm seeing things more clearly than I have in months. I walked back toward the Silverado I'd been working on, but I paused next to Carlos. Carlos, you might want to stick around for a little while. I have a feeling this afternoon is going to be very interesting. Carlos nodded slowly. He'd known me long enough to recognize when something important was about to happen. Brandon was still grinning, completely oblivious to what was coming. But Margaret would be here in less than 2 hours, and she was bringing instantly the kind of paperwork that changes everything. By 3:30, word had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Brandon Wilson, the mechanic's son, had won $8 million and was taking over his father's auto shop. That's when Amy Johnson showed up. Amy was a reporter for Channel 7 News, one of those local human interest story people who specialized in feel-good segments about lottery winners and community events. She was 38, blonde, energetic, and she smelled a story. Mr. Wilson, she called out as she walked into the shop with her cameraman. I'm Amy Johnson from Channel 7. We heard about your son's lottery win. Could we get an interview? Brandon's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Absolutely, he said, straightening his shirt and running a hand through his hair. This is exactly the kind of publicity we need. I kept working on the Silverado, but I was listening to every word. So, Brandon, tell us about the moment you realized you'd won. Well, Amy, it was incredible. I checked the numbers 3 times because I couldn't believe it. $8.1 million. Life-changing money. And what are your plans for the future? Brandon gestured around the shop with theatrical flourish. I'm going to completely transform this business. My father's been running it the same way for 25 years, and frankly, it's time for new blood. New ideas, new energy. Jerry and Paul were pretending to work, but I could see them listening. Carlos was sitting in the waiting area with his brother Miguel, both of them watching the interview with uncomfortable expressions. Tell us about your father's role going forward, Amy said. Brandon's smile got bigger and meaner. Well, that's the thing about success, Amy. It requires making tough decisions. My father represents the old way of doing business. Manual labor, slow service, outdated customer relations. Amy nodded encouragingly. So you're planning changes? Major changes. I'm going to modernize everything. Install computerized diagnostic equipment. Hire younger, more efficient staff. Implement modern business practices. What does your father think about these plans? Brandon glanced over at me. I was still focused on the Silverado's engine, but I could feel his eyes. Honestly, my father's been holding this business back for decades. He's stuck in 1999. He doesn't understand that customers want efficiency, not some old guy taking forever with basic repairs. The shop went dead quiet. Even Amy seemed a little surprised by the harshness of Brandon's words. That seems harsh, she said. Amy, let me tell you something about the auto repair business. Success requires vision. My father's vision stopped evolving 20 years ago. He's comfortable with poverty. I'm not. Carlos shifted in his chair. Miguel looked genuinely shocked. Can you give us some specific examples? Amy asked. Sure. Our equipment is ancient. We're using tools that belong in a museum. Our customer service is basically non-existent. No automated booking system, no online presence, no marketing strategy, and our staff. Brandon looked directly at Jerry and Paul. Our staff represents everything that's wrong with blue-collar mentality. No ambition, no efficiency, no understanding of modern business principles. Jerry's face was turning red. Paul had stopped pretending to work entirely. So you're planning to replace your current employees? I'm planning to upgrade everything, employees included. Amy was eating this up. Drama made for good television. And what role will your father play in this new vision? Brandon paused for effect. The pause stretched uncomfortably long. My father's contributions to this business ended the day I won that lottery ticket. He taught me everything I need to know about what not to do. That's when Carlos stood up. Excuse me, he said firmly, but that's not right. Amy turned her camera toward Carlos. You are? Carlos Martinez. I've been bringing my family's cars here for 18 years. And what's your perspective on this situation? Carlos looked at Brandon, then at me, then back at Amy. Tom Wilson is the most honest mechanic in Toledo. He saved my family thousands of dollars over the years by fixing things right the first time. He's never overcharged me, never tried to sell me services I didn't need, never missed a deadline. Brandon's smile was getting strained. Mr. Martinez, I appreciate your loyalty to my father, but I'm not finished, Carlos said. His voice was calm but firm. Your father didn't just build a business. He built relationships, trust, reputation, things you can't buy with lottery money. Amy was loving this. Community drama was ratings gold. Brandon, how do you respond to that? Well, Amy, loyalty is admirable, but it doesn't pay the bills. Mr. Martinez represents exactly the kind of old-fashioned thinking that's keeping this business in the past. Carlos's brother Miguel stood up too. Old-fashioned thinking, Miguel said. Tom Wilson has been taking care of our family's cars since before you could legally drive. Gentlemen, Amy interrupted, let's keep this focused on the lottery win and the business transformation. But Brandon was getting defensive now. And when Brandon got defensive, he got mean. You know what the real problem is here, he said, looking directly into the camera. People in this neighborhood are afraid of success. They're comfortable with mediocrity. They don't want things to improve because improvement requires change. He gestured toward me again. My father's outdated methods held us back for decades. His poverty mentality, his fear of investment, his inability to understand modern business. That's when I finally looked up from the Silverado. Brandon, I said quietly. What, Dad? Margaret's here. Through the shop's front window, we could all see Margaret Davis walking across the parking lot with a briefcase in her hand. Brandon's confident smile flickered. What does she want? She wants to look at some paperwork. Amy sensed another dramatic moment brewing. Who's Margaret? She asked. Our family attorney, I said. The shop door opened and Margaret walked in. She took one look at the news crew, the uncomfortable faces, and Brandon's suddenly nervous expression. Tom, she said, I think we need to talk. Margaret Davis wasn't a dramatic person. 20 years of family law had taught her to speak carefully, precisely, and always with evidence to back up every word. She was 45, gray-haired, and she wore the kind of sensible business suit that said, I don't have time for nonsense. When Margaret opened her briefcase, people paid attention. Tom called me about some business records, she said, looking around the shop. But I see we have company. Amy Johnson stepped forward with her microphone. I'm Amy Johnson, Channel 7 News. We're doing a story about Brandon's lottery win and his plans for the family business. Margaret nodded politely. Congratulations on your win, Brandon. Brandon's confidence was starting to return. Thank you, Mrs. Davis. As I was just telling the reporter, I'm planning some major improvements around here. That's interesting, Margaret said. She set her briefcase on my desk and opened it. Tom, you mentioned some paperwork regarding lottery ticket purchases? That's right. Brandon laughed. Mrs. Davis, I think there's been some confusion. I won the lottery. I have the winning ticket. This is all very straightforward. Margaret pulled out a manila folder, the same one I'd shown Brandon earlier. Actually, Brandon, it might be a little more complicated than that. She opened the folder and spread several documents across my desk. Bank statements, purchase receipts, security camera timestamps. Tom, could you walk me through these transactions? I moved away from the Silverado and stood next to Margaret. Everyone else, Brandon, Amy, the cameraman, Jerry, Paul, Carlos, and Miguel, gathered around to watch. Starting June 6th, I said, I began purchasing lottery tickets every Tuesday using our business debit card. Account number ending in 4429. Margaret held up a bank statement. I can see the transactions here. $40 every Tuesday for 12 consecutive weeks. Brandon was frowning now. Dad, I don't understand what you're trying to prove. August 15th, 3:47 p.m. Murphy's gas station. I purchased 5 quick pick tickets using the business account. Margaret opened another folder. And you have the receipt? I pulled it out of my wallet. The paper was still crisp, the timestamp clearly visible. Receipt number GB8 8294451. 5 tickets at $8 each. Amy Johnson was filming everything. This was turning into a much better story than she'd expected. Brandon, Margaret said, when did you purchase your winning ticket? August 15th, the same day, but I paid cash. And where did you buy it? Murphy's gas station. Margaret nodded and pulled out another document. I stopped by Murphy's on my way here. Spoke with the manager, Steve Chen, very helpful gentleman. She handed me a printed email. Steve provided the security camera footage from August 15th, along with transaction records. Brandon's face was losing color. The interesting thing about Murphy's system, Margaret continued, is that they timestamp every transaction and cross-reference it with their security cameras. Steve was able to pull up the exact footage from 3:47 p.m. She handed me a printed screenshot from the security video. It showed me at the counter, clearly visible, handing my debit card to the cashier. Tom Wilson, 3:47 p.m., purchasing 5 lottery tickets with business account 4429. Amy was practically vibrating with excitement. This was turning into investigative journalism. But Brandon, Margaret said, according to the footage, you arrived at Murphy's at 4:52 p.m., more than an hour later. Brandon started to speak, but Margaret held up her hand. The transaction records show that by 4:52 p.m., all the quick pick tickets from the 3:47 batch had already been sold. The tickets you purchased came from a different batch entirely. The shop was dead silent. You could hear the air compressor cycling. Jerry's mouth was hanging open. Paul was staring at the documents spread across my desk. That's impossible, Brandon said. I have the winning numbers. Brandon, I said quietly, what numbers did you pick? I didn't pick numbers. I bought quick pick tickets, same as always. Same as always? Yeah, I've been buying tickets there for months. I looked at Margaret. She nodded and pulled out another document. Brandon, according to Murphy's records, you've been purchasing tickets every Wednesday for the past 6 months. Always on Wednesdays. Always at around 5 p.m. Always cash. She handed him a transaction summary. But the winning ticket was sold on Tuesday at 3:47 p.m. to your father, using the business account. Carlos started laughing. Not the uncomfortable laugh from earlier, a genuine, shocked, amazed laugh. Tom, he said, are you telling us that you won the lottery? Not exactly, I said. I'm telling you that the winning ticket was purchased with business funds from the business account during business hours as part of a business expense that's been documented for 12 consecutive weeks. Amy Johnson was filming frantically. So, who legally owns the winnings? Margaret closed her briefcase with a satisfying click. That's an excellent question. Under Ohio law, lottery tickets purchased with business funds by an authorized business owner become business assets, unless there's a written agreement stating otherwise. She looked at Brandon. Brandon, do you have any documentation showing that your father authorized you to claim winnings from business purchase tickets? Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I didn't know. Furthermore, Margaret continued, the business account records show that Tom Wilson is the sole authorized signatory. Brandon's name doesn't appear on any of the account documentation. Jerry started grinning. Paul was shaking his head in amazement. Carlos looked like he'd just witnessed a miracle. So, what does this mean exactly? Amy asked. Margaret looked directly into the camera. It means that the $8.1 million lottery ticket was purchased by Tom Wilson using funds from an account he solely controls as part of a documented business practice. Under Ohio law, those winnings belong to the business entity. Brandon finally found his voice. But I'm the one who checked the numbers. I'm the one who dash dash. Brandon, I said gently, checking numbers doesn't make you the owner. Having your name on the purchase documentation does. Margaret handed me a thick manila envelope. Tom, I took the liberty of preparing the necessary paperwork to claim the winnings on behalf of Wilson's Auto Repair. Brandon stared at the envelope like it was a snake. This can't be legal, he said. Actually, Margaret replied, it's completely legal, and documented and witnessed. She gestured around the shop. We have multiple witnesses to your father's regular lottery purchases. We have bank records, we have security footage, we have transaction receipts. Carlos stood up and started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster. Jerry joined in, then Paul. Even Miguel was applauding. Amy Johnson turned to her cameraman. Are you getting all of this? Brandon looked around the shop, at the applauding customers, at the grinning employees, at the reporter who was documenting his public humiliation, at his father who was holding $8 million worth of legal documentation. This isn't over, he said, but we all knew it was. Brandon's threat hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds before Margaret spoke up. Actually, Brandon, it is over. Unless you want to make things significantly worse for yourself. She pulled out yet another document from her seemingly endless briefcase. Tom, when you called me this afternoon, I took the liberty of researching Ohio's fraud statutes, specifically laws regarding false claims to lottery winnings. Brandon's face went pale. Under Ohio Revised Code Section 2913.02, knowingly claiming ownership of property that belongs to another person constitutes theft. When the value exceeds $1 million, it becomes a first-degree felony. Amy Johnson was getting all of this on camera. Her story had just transformed from local man wins lottery to local man commits felony on live television. Furthermore, Margaret continued, your public statements to the media constitute evidence of intent. You've explicitly claimed ownership of winnings that, according to documented evidence, belong to your father's business. Brandon looked around the shop desperately. Dad, you can't be serious about this. Brandon, I said quietly, you threw me out of my own shop. You fired my employees. You humiliated me in front of my customers. You told a reporter that I never contributed anything real to this business. I walked over to my desk and picked up the legal documents Margaret had prepared. You wanted to know about contributions? Here's mine. I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. Legal claim for lottery winnings purchased with business funds, filed this morning with the Ohio Lottery Commission. Brandon's hands were shaking. You filed a claim? Margaret filed it for me, along with all the supporting documentation. Jerry was grinning from ear to ear. Paul looked like he was watching the best movie of his life. Carlos had his phone out, probably texting his wife about the drama unfolding at Wilson's Auto Repair. The Ohio Lottery Commission takes these disputes very seriously, Margaret said. They've already acknowledged receipt of our claim and supporting evidence. They've also been notified of your competing claim. She handed Brandon a single sheet of paper. This is a cease and desist letter. You are legally prohibited from attempting to claim, spend, or transfer any portion of the disputed winnings until the matter is resolved. Brandon stared at the letter like it was written in a foreign language. How long does that take? For a case this well documented? Probably 2 weeks, maybe 3. Amy Johnson stepped forward with her microphone. Brandon, do you have any response to these allegations? Brandon looked at the camera, then at Margaret, then at me. His confident swagger had completely evaporated. I didn't know about the business account thing. Ignorance of the law isn't a defense, Margaret said matter-of-factly. But I'm his son. Doesn't that count for something? Margaret's expression softened slightly. Brandon, being someone's son gives you the right to love and respect. It doesn't give you the right to steal from them. Carlos stood up from his chair in the waiting area. Tom, he said, I owe you an apology. For what? For sitting here and watching your own son disrespect you without saying something sooner? He walked over and extended his hand. You've been taking care of my family's cars for 18 years. You've never once overcharged me, never tried to sell me services I didn't need, never missed a deadline you promised. We shook hands. That kind of integrity doesn't happen by accident. Carlos continued. It comes from character. Something money can't buy. Miguel nodded in agreement. Tom, whatever you need, customers, referrals, anything, you just ask. Jerry wiped his hands on a shop rag and walked over. Boss, does this mean Paul and I still have jobs? I looked at Brandon, who was staring at the floor. Jerry, this shop has always been about family. Real family. The kind that shows up for work every day and treats customers like neighbors. Paul joined us. So, what happens now? Margaret answered for me. Now we wait for the Ohio Lottery Commission to process the claim. In the meantime, business continues as usual. She turned to Amy Johnson. I assume Channel 7 will want to follow up on this story? Amy's eyes were bright with excitement. Absolutely. This is exactly the kind of human interest story our viewers love. Good. Because there's an important lesson here about family respect and the difference between earning something and stealing it. Brandon finally looked up from the floor. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Brandon, I interrupted gently. Sorry doesn't fix broken trust. But if you're genuinely sorry, you'll have plenty of opportunities to prove it. I folded the legal documents and put them back in the envelope. Your mother spent her whole life trying to teach you about character, about treating people with dignity, about earning respect instead of demanding it. Brandon's eyes were getting wet. She would have been ashamed of what happened here today. The shop went quiet. Amy Johnson lowered her microphone, recognizing that some moments were too personal for television. But she also would have believed in second chances, I continued, if you're willing to earn one. Brandon nodded, tears streaming down his face. Margaret, I said, what does Brandon need to do to avoid legal consequences? Officially withdraw his claim to the lottery winnings, publicly acknowledge the mistake, and probably attend some counseling sessions about financial responsibility. I looked at my son. Brandon, what do you think? He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I think I've been an idiot. Dad, and I think I owe a lot of people apologies. Carlos clapped Brandon on the shoulder. That's a start, son. Amy Johnson raised her microphone again. Tom, how does it feel to go from being kicked out of your own shop to winning $8 million? I thought about that for a moment. It feels like justice, I said, but more than that, it feels like proof that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, eventually pays off. Brandon was nodding through his tears. Now, I said, we have work to finish. Jerry, is that brake job ready for Carlos? Jerry grinned. Give me 10 more minutes, boss. And just like that, Wilson's Auto Repair went back to being what it had always been, a family business. 3 weeks later, the Ohio Lottery Commission's ruling arrived by certified mail. Margaret called me at 7 in the morning to read it over the phone. Tom, you're officially an $8.1 million lottery winner. The commission ruled that the ticket was legally purchased with business funds by an authorized business owner. Brandon's competing claim has been dismissed. I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee from the same chipped mug I'd used for 15 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. What about Brandon's legal situation? He withdrew his claim voluntarily and issued a public apology. No criminal charges will be filed. The public apology had been Brandon's idea. He'd called Amy Johnson and asked for another interview, this time to set the record straight. I made a terrible mistake, he'd told Channel 7's viewers. I let money cloud my judgment, and I disrespected the man who taught me everything I know about work, integrity, and family. My father didn't just win the lottery, he earned it through 25 years of honest business practices. The interview had gone viral on social media, not because of the lottery drama, but because people were hungry for stories about accountability and redemption. Amy Johnson had turned our story into a 3-part series called The Real Cost of Winning. Part 1 covered the initial confrontation. Part 2 revealed the legal battle. Part 3 focused on forgiveness and second chances. In a world where family dysfunction dominates the headlines, Amy had said in her closing segment, the Wilson family reminds us that love, respect, and integrity still matter more than money. The attention had been overwhelming. Wilson's Auto Repair went from serving 341 local customers to having a waiting list of over 800 people. Customers were driving from 3 counties away just to meet the lottery winner who almost lost everything to his own son. But the real consequences weren't about fame or money. They were about relationships. Carlos Martinez had organized what he called Tom Wilson Appreciation Week. Every customer who'd ever used our services received a handwritten invitation to stop by the shop for free coffee and donuts. Over 200 people showed up throughout the week. Mrs. Patterson, the lady with the Honda Civic, brought her daughter and 2 grandchildren. I wanted them to meet a man who knows the difference between price and value, she told me. Jerry and Paul had become minor celebrities themselves. Jerry's daughter, Sarah, started college that fall with a full scholarship I'd quietly arranged. Paul's son got his orthodontic work done, plus I'd set up education funds for both their families. Boss, Jerry had said, you didn't have to do any of this. Jerry, family takes care of family, and you've been family for 11 years. The business transformation was remarkable, but not in the way Brandon had originally envisioned. Instead of firing older employees and installing computer systems, I'd invested in the people and relationships that made Wilson's Auto Repair special. We upgraded our equipment, but we kept our personal touch. We hired 2 additional mechanics, both experienced professionals who understood our commitment to quality over speed. We expanded our waiting area and added a coffee station, but customers still got to talk directly to the person working on their car. The $8 million was split 50-50 between business improvements and personal financial security. $4 million went into expanding Wilson's Auto Repair into a regional service center specializing in honest, relationship-based automotive care. The other $4 million went into investments that would ensure I never had to worry about mortgage payments or medical bills again. But the most important consequence was what happened with Brandon. My son had spent 3 weeks living with the reality of his public humiliation. He'd lost his girlfriend Ashley, who'd apparently been more interested in his lottery winnings than his character. He'd been forced to move back into his childhood bedroom in my house. Most painfully, he'd had to face our customers and neighbors every single day. Dad, he'd said to me one evening, I need to understand something. How did you stay so calm during all of that? We were sitting on the front porch, drinking beer and watching the sunset. Brandon, when you've lived through your mother's cancer battle, financial struggles, and 30 years of running a small business, you learn that panic doesn't solve problems. Patience and preparation do. But I treated you terribly. I humiliated you in front of everyone. Why didn't you fight back? I took a long sip of beer before answering. Because fighting back would have made me just like you were that day. Angry, impulsive, and focused on winning instead of doing what's right. Brandon had been attending counseling sessions with Dr. Elizabeth Turner, a financial therapist who specialized in helping people manage sudden wealth. The sessions were Margaret's idea, but Brandon had embraced them enthusiastically. Dr. Turner says I have something called anticipatory entitlement, Brandon told me. I spent so much time imagining what I'd do with money that I started believing I deserved it before I'd actually earned it. The counseling was working. Slowly, but it was working. Brandon had asked to come back to work at the shop, but on my terms. He started as an apprentice mechanic, learning the trade from the ground up under Jerry's supervision. No special treatment, no management responsibilities, just honest work for honest pay. I want to earn my place here, he'd said, the right way this time. The community had been surprisingly forgiving. Carlos Martinez had become Brandon's unofficial mentor, teaching him about customer relationships and professional respect. Mrs. Patterson had even brought her car to Brandon specifically, telling him, everyone deserves a second chance, young man. Don't waste yours. Amy Johnson had continued following our story, producing monthly updates on the Wilson family recovery. Her reporting had attracted national attention, with features in Good Morning America and CNN's Human Interest segments. The Wilson story isn't really about lottery winnings, Amy had said during a CNN interview. It's about what happens when a family chooses growth over grudges, accountability over anger. But the most meaningful consequence happened 6 months after the initial confrontation. Brandon and I were working together on a complicated transmission repair when he stopped what he was doing and looked at me directly. Dad, I need to tell you something. What's that? I'm proud to be your son. Not because of the money, not because of the media attention, but because you showed me what real strength looks like. He wiped his hands on a shop rag, the same gesture I'd seen him make 1,000 times growing up. You could have destroyed me that day. You had every right to press charges, to cut me out of your life, to make me pay for how I treated you. But I didn't. No, you didn't. Instead, you showed me mercy, and you made me earn it. We finished the transmission repair in comfortable silence, working together like we had when Brandon was 15, and eager to learn everything I could teach him. That evening, Margaret called with news about a legal development. Tom, I've been contacted by the Ohio Lottery Commission about something interesting. They want to use your case as a model for new regulations about business purchase tickets. What kind of regulations? Clearer guidelines about ownership, documentation requirements, and family dispute resolution. Your case highlighted some gaps in their current policies. So our family drama was going to help other families avoid similar problems. That felt like the kind of positive outcome Linda would have approved of. The consequences of that September afternoon extended far beyond money or fame. They'd restored respect, rebuilt relationships, and reminded an entire community that character matters more than cash. Brandon was learning, I was healing, and Wilson's auto repair was stronger than ever. Sometimes the best consequences are the ones that teach us who we really are. 1 year later, Wilson's auto repair looked different but felt the same. We'd expanded into the building next door, doubling our workspace and adding a customer lounge with comfortable chairs, free Wi-Fi, and that coffee station that had become legendary among our clients. The equipment was state-of-the-art, but we still took our time with every job. Our staff had grown from 3 to 8 mechanics, but every new hire had to pass what Carlos Martinez jokingly called the Tom Wilson character test. Technical skills could be taught. Integrity couldn't. Brandon had become our head diagnostic specialist. It took him 11 months to earn that position, working his way up from apprentice to journeyman to specialist through pure determination and humility. Jerry had been his toughest teacher, but also his biggest supporter. "Your boy's got good hands," Jerry told me one afternoon. More importantly, he's got a good heart now. The lottery money had been invested wisely. $4 million had transformed Wilson's Auto Repair into Wilson's Automotive Center, serving customers from a 50-mile radius. The other $4 million was generating enough income to ensure I'd never worry about retirement, medical bills, or emergency expenses. But the real transformation was in our family relationships. Brandon and I had developed new boundaries based on mutual respect rather than assumed privilege. He lived in his own apartment now, paid for with his earnings from the shop. He'd started dating a teacher named Rebecca Chen, who valued his work ethic more than his bank account. Most importantly, he'd learned to separate self-worth from net worth. "Dad," he'd said to me recently, "I used to think success meant having enough money to look down on other people. Now I know success means having enough character to lift other people up." The media attention had gradually faded, but the lessons remained. Amy Johnson still checked in occasionally, using our story as an example of how families can recover from financial conflicts through accountability and forgiveness. Dr. Turner, Brandon's counselor, had asked to use our case study in her research on family wealth dynamics. She was particularly interested in how traditional values could coexist with sudden financial changes. The Wilson family proved that money doesn't have to destroy relationships, she'd written in her report. When core values remain strong, wealth becomes a tool for building rather than a weapon for dividing. Our customer base had stabilized at around 600 regular clients. People came to Wilson's Automotive Center not just for repairs, but for the experience of being treated with respect and honesty. We'd accidentally created something unique in the automotive industry, a service center that felt like family. Carlos Martinez had become our unofficial customer relations ambassador. He'd organized a Wilson's Family social media group where customers shared photos of their cars, recommended our services to friends, and celebrated milestones in their own lives. "Tom," Carlos told me, "you didn't just win the lottery. You won something more valuable. You won respect." Mrs. Patterson, now 83, still brought her Honda Civic to us for service. Her granddaughter had started driving and naturally brought her car to Brandon for maintenance. 3 generations of Pattersons, she told me proudly, all trusting Wilsons with our family's safety. That trust was the real measure of our success. Margaret Davis had become more than our attorney. She'd become a family friend who regularly stopped by the shop for coffee and conversation. She'd also helped us establish the Wilson Family Foundation, which provided automotive training scholarships for young people from low-income families. Giving back isn't optional when you've been blessed, I'd told Brandon. It's mandatory. The foundation had already sponsored 12 students through automotive technical programs. 2 of them were now working as mechanics at shops across Ohio, carrying on the tradition of honest, skilled automotive service. But the most meaningful change was in my relationship with Brandon. We worked together every day, but as colleagues rather than father and subordinate. He brought fresh ideas and energy. I provided experience and wisdom. Neither of us tried to dominate the other. You know what I learned from all this? Brandon asked me one evening as we locked up the shop. What's that? Respect isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn every single day through your actions. I smiled, remembering the 18-year-old kid who used to roll his eyes when I talked about character and work ethic. And how do you feel about that? Grateful, he said without hesitation. Grateful that you didn't give up on me. Grateful that our customers gave me a second chance. Grateful that I learned the difference between winning and earning. As we walked to our trucks, I reflected on everything that had changed since that September afternoon when Brandon told me to get out of my own shop. The lottery ticket had given us $8 million, but the real prize was getting my son back. If you're dealing with family conflicts over money, inheritance, or business ownership, remember this. Money reveals character. It doesn't create it. Focus on building relationships based on respect rather than wealth. Set clear boundaries. Document everything, and never let greed override love. What's your story? How have you handled family conflicts over money? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Because at the end of the day, family isn't about what you inherit. It's about what you build together.